This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. Greetings from Mexico. You can see I am clearly in a different place yet again. This is such a random reference. Do you remember Nicole Richie and Paris Hilton? Of course, Simple Life. But remember when they did Road Trip? So this is Note to Self Road Trip. Although I'm not even on a road trip. I'm just bopping around to different places. That was such a pivot. Don't know where we went there, but let's go with it. So this is the Traveling Diaries of Note to Self. And I'm in Mexico. So I'm down in Baja California, in a small town called Todos Santos. Todos Santos. Everyone says it like that. I mean, not like that, but in a much better way. I used to go Todos Santos, which is cute. And on the plane here, the air hostess was asking me, I flew from LA, and she was like, oh, where are you going? You fly into Cabo. And I was like, oh, we're going to this little beach town called Todos Santos on the Atlantic side. I said it like super confidently. She kind of looked at me, like, a little like, what? And I was looking at her, looking at me, going, what? And I'm like, what? And in that moment, I realized that there is no Atlantic side down here. It is the Pacific side. This is the Australian at heart who always grew up on the Atlantic Ocean. This woman probably thought I was a fucking idiot. So I was like, oh, I am so sorry. I meant the Pacific side. That Atlantic side does not exist. I'm from Australia. I grew up on the different side. And she just giggled. But I was like, God, what an idiot. Geography, am I right? It is not easy, especially when I sound American. So in the US, when I don't know where things are at times, I feel like I sound like an absolute idiot. Because it's like, I didn't learn the 50 states. I didn't learn the 51. Rough start to the podcast today, guys. How many states in the USA? 50. Yes, nailed it. So I don't know all the 50 states, so it is what it is. And that's when I try and like throw on my Aussie accent a little more to make it seem like I'm not an idiot. Anyways, so I'm on the west coast of Mexico, in the Baja California Peninsula. There we go. And it's, this beautiful little beach town. Jeffrey's friends moved here about 7 years ago, and they opened this beautiful little boutique hotel and restaurant. Shout out to Cian Palmas. If you're ever here, the property I think has like 4 casitas. It might be 3, but it's perfect for like a couple or if you were a group of friends and wanted to rent all of them. And they've got a really cute restaurant, great food, love their mezcal, passion fruit margarita, chef's kiss, gorgeous. So they moved here, and then I think Jeffrey and some of his friends discovered it. And a lot of people who live in LA tend to come down here. It's like a popular destination. It's not even a 2-hour flight. And New York recently started direct flights from New York into Cabo. You fly into Cabo, and then you drive about an hour and a half across the peninsula to the Pacific side. And it's a super popular destination as well for surfing. So a lot of surfers, and you're surrounded, it's in the desert. So it's just cactus everywhere. And then you can probably see behind me in the far distance, there's these mountains, and they're the Sierra de la Laguna mountain range. So that's behind you. So it's super cool because it's desert, mountains, ocean. It's so beautiful. I came here November last year. I think I spoke about it on the podcast. I was here for a wedding, and that was my first time, and I fell in love. And Jeffrey bought land here years ago, and I think we're debating, maybe building something or what we want to do with it and having this kind of as our out-of-city escape, which would just be so lovely because it's such a beautiful place to live. It's just so relaxing. And, I think I've spoken about this on the podcast before, having some type of escape. I'm very grateful that we'd likely be able to do this. But what we decided to do is we wanted to bring my parents here because they're visiting in the US for a while. And it's just an easier place to be for a longer time. So we got an Airbnb, and Mom, Dad, me, and Jeffrey have been here. I had one of my really good friends from LA come out for a weekend, and then we had some of our other friends from Miami fly out, and they just left. So we're here for another week, which is great. More about Todos is the population's around 10,000. I always ask this question everywhere I go. It's actually insane. I'm always like, what's the population? Because everything the size of a city, to me, I base it off two things. Townsville in Australia, where I grew up, which was 170,000, and New York City, which is like, I think New York is 8 million, something like that. NYC, guys, I love having my laptop this close. I can live fact check. Oh, guys, nailed it. New York City population is approximately 8.48 million. Damn, love that I remembered that, which is hysterical because that is the widest range to base something on. But it's like I can weirdly figure out the size of a city based on that. So 10,000, I was like, okay, that makes sense to me based off where I kind of grew up. And it's tiny. You have like a very small little city center. We're staying about 10 minutes out of the main town. And this, when you kind of drive out of town, you have all these sand dunes that we look out to. And then behind us, you can see a lot of it. Like there's a few houses behind me, but a lot is just open land because a lot of the lots out here don't even have water or electrical access. You kind of have to build that. But as like more people are moving here, they're building more electrical lines and it's starting to become a bit more developed. But that's what's so special about it is there's still like a lot of areas that are very underdeveloped and you could just look out to empty space, which I adore. But yeah, highly recommend it for a winter escape. I think the high season, they say, and the best time of year to come here, I believe it's November, December until April. September is hurricane season, so don't come here then. And then the summer is like brutally hot. And you can come down here, of course, in the summer, but they say the winter is the best time. So I've really felt for my friends that are in New York City and the east coast of the US is just getting blasted with horrifically bad weather, just so cold. I read yesterday over the weekend that the mayor was saying that in New York City that you couldn't be outside for more than like 15 minutes. So you could risk frostbite, which is just nutty. It was like negative 17 degrees Celsius. I'm doing Celsius. My Fahrenheit people can work it out. They're there. But it's brutal. So we go back on Saturday and I'm slightly dreading it. I was debating staying here. I just won't be leaving the apartment. And I'm hoping we are through the worst of it. So very grateful to be here and in the sun. And it's just so warm. And I've been laughing at our friends here because they're coming out with like a puffer jacket on. And I'm dying as I'm in like a singlet and shorts. I was like, it is so not cold. But that's what it was like where I grew up. The tiniest bit of the weather dropping, you find it cold. So yeah, it's a really, really, really special place. And we had this beautiful day where it was, a few days ago, we decided to rent a boat, and you can rent boats out of two places. There's this town called La Paz and obviously Cabo. Everybody goes to Cabo, guys. Cabo is not it. It's just filled with hotels and resorts, and the beaches aren't really swimmable. I mean, it's not super swimmable here. There's like one surfer beach you can go to, but La Paz, actually, if you want something super swimmable that's like very kid-friendly, because it's on the other side of the peninsula, which is along the Sea of Cortez, there's not as many waves, so the water is very flat. So it's actually a great place to go if you are a family. You would still fly into Cabo and then just drive up to La Paz. But I think so many people do Cabo and it's just so Americanized and it's kind of sad how much it's changed, but there's so many other spots around here that are beautiful. But what we were able to do is from La Paz, you can do these day trips out to this island. It's called Espiritu Santo. I'm for sure butchering that, but it's this uninhabited island off the coast, and they call it like, what is it? Like the real life aquarium or, something like that, where there's just so much wildlife and it's so remote and stunning. So we were able to do this day visit, which includes going to a sea lion colony. And then we also were able to go to one of like the best beaches in Mexico, which also you pull in at, that's on the main shore. You can drive there, but it's kind of hard to get there because they limit the amount of cars that go in. But I wanted to talk about this day because it was truly the most magical day. I had a similar feeling as to when I went to Burning Man, for those who listened to the Burning Man episode, where those who know Burning Man, the saying is the playa provides. So you have these magical things happen when you're out there where you're asking for something and then all of a sudden maybe you run into someone or you stumble across, a camp or someone out in the playa that's, giving out something of, maybe you were like, oh, I'm really craving pizza. And then you find some random person who's giving away pizza because you don't sell anything. But I had that feeling being out on this boat, and it just kept feeling like La Paz provides. We kept having these weird scenarios of things that were happening. So I'll tell you about the day, because we started in the morning where we left on this boat. We had booked a catamaran for our group, which was my mom, dad, me, and Jeffrey, our 2 friends who were visiting from Miami, who are very close family friends, or their family, and then Jeffrey's 2 friends who live here. And we were visiting this sea lion colony as the first stop. And, in my head, which we should know by now that my head is very incorrect when it comes to animals. Clearly, the India story with visiting the weaver, which I thought was a beaver. Go back, listen to India. You'll hear the story. There's 2 India episodes. Let's just leave it at I'm insane. So in my head, sea lion colony. We would be out in nature. Duh. There'd be all these sea lions. You would get in the water. You would be able to play with the sea lions. They would come up, they'd kiss you on the cheek. Maybe I'd be able to hug one like this and just turn the video on, guys, hugging the sea lion with my face pressed up to his slimy little face, or her slimy little face, or their slimy little face. I don't know. Genders are a construct. And we're just snuggling up, and it'd be so cute. And they have their cute little whiskers, and then they'd swim around, which, elements of this happened, but we get there. So sea lions are obviously, these animals are in the wild. They are not pets. So we had to stay 15 feet away, or else they get a little territorial. So my idea of cuddling them was definitely off the cards, but it's fine. I accepted that and wanted to make sure we not encroach on their territory. But it was really cool. There was this rocky outpost, and I swear there was probably, 200 sea lions. It was kind of hard to tell because they're all piled on top of each other. And the further up the rocks you go, the bigger the sea lions get, because the bigger ones, which are the alphas, they sit at the very top, and they're huge. They could be anywhere from they go up to 8 feet, which is 2.5 meters. And I swear to God, I saw one that big. It was giant, or as I like to say, ginormous. It's a word that I made up. Jeffrey hates that I use that, but I like it. And there was cute little sea lions sitting on rocks with just their little noses right up into the air. Oh, they're so cute. And they have the cutest little whiskers. So you kind of snorkel around this outcrop, and you can see the sea lions, and they're all doing their little, they call them dogs of the sea dogs. And they truly are, because they make that sound. What is it? Oh, oh, oh. An animal podcast. Here we go. I'll just do animal sounds all of the podcast. Yeah, but it's they're barking. It was so cute. And you could swim around, and then they do kind of swim around you. At one stage, they came in under us, and we could watch them playing, and they're grabbing each other's necks. They're biting onto each other's necks and tussling in the ocean. And oh my God, it was so beautiful just watching these animals. I could have watched them for ages. And just seeing them right there. But they were so uninterested in us, which I thought was interesting, because my dad's a marine biologist, and he was with us. And he's in his experience, he's had sea lions really be fascinated by him and kind of come up and want to play. But I think that's probably maybe sea lions in more remote areas. This is a place that a lot of humans come to see them. So they're probably just so unfazed. So these humans are we're far enough back that we're not encroaching on their space, but they're probably just we see this every day. But it was really, really special. And at the very end, as I was watching these animals, and a few of us had gone into the other boat, this giant sea lion, definitely one of the alphas, came in and gathered them up to take them back to shore. And I freaked out, swam, and I was that's my cue to leave. The big one is scary, man. It is so big. But it was a truly real life aquarium. Truly, I went to sleep that night envisioning those animals playing. It was just something that will be in my mind forever. They are such special creatures. And then after that, we went to Balandra Beach, which is considered one of the best beaches in Mexico. So this is the one I said that you can drive to, but they limit the traffic. So there's only a few cars that go in every day. I think it's 200, which is still a lot. But the best way to do it is via boat, because you go into this bay, and there's the really famous one that they let you into, but all the others are only accessed by boat. So you can go to beaches that are the exact same, but you're the only ones in it on these little boats. So we had a larger catamaran and then a smaller boat that could kind of get into these smaller coves, because the water is, probably up to this table, which is, just below my hip. And it's like that for miles because it's all these sandbanks and you can just walk for miles in, thigh deep water that's crystal clear. And then you look up, and because this is on the main coast, you have those mountain ranges in the back. And it really looked like Hawaii. It was wild. It reminded me so much of Hawaii. And there's cactuses that are growing up the mountain range, and we were able to pull into this little remote cove, and it was just us, and it was so magical. So we stopped there and had a kind of midday, and then from there we went to this Espiritu Santo, the island, which has countless coves you can explore, and this is the one that's totally uninhabited and only you can access via boat. So we could only visit one spot because it was a limited day. It honestly would be so worth doing an overnight cruise to be able to explore more. But we moored in this cove, and then we took the smaller boat to this shallow area where there was the frigate bird colony. It's a type of bird. You can Google it. This was where I think we really started to see the magic. So earlier that day, my dad had said he was really looking forward to seeing different birds. He's really into birds. He is a marine biologist, but he loves birds. So when we pulled up to this colony, it was honestly just like such a dream because, dad had spent, I'll tell you why the frigate bird was super important. So my dad has spent half his life living on his research vessel. And when he was in the Solomon Islands, a local tribe was having this special feast that happens like once in a generation. And in this feast, the surrounding villages bring pigs where they sacrifice 300 pigs and they feed the scraps to all the sharks, and all the sharks come in and swim around and are eating the pigs. And apparently all the kids were swimming with the sharks. It was very beautiful. And the reason they do this is there's these various lineages in these communities where they believe that different animals are their ancestors. Some believe ancestors are sharks, dolphins, frigate birds, and they worship these animals. So when dad was here and all of this was happening, one of the women there who's married to one of the tribal leaders, she was a medium. And she actually ended up giving my dad a double-headed frigate bird tattoo, which was like one of the, symbols of the animals that they worship. So my dad had that. It was drawn by a local boy who was in the community, who's an artist. And then the woman gave my dad the tattoo on his arm. So frigate birds have always meant a lot to him. And he's seen a ton in his life, but it was just more that day he was really wanting to see birds. And we hadn't seen a ton. And then they ended up taking us to this frigate bird colony. And there was hundreds of them. And it just felt so kismet. And the next, we got there and my dad wasn't there. So we went back to the boat to go get him and to bring him back, which was just like such a beautiful, beautiful moment for him to be able to see that. And I'm going to quickly pause because when I was asking my dad, I wanted to get the details of the tattoo. And there was a story that my dad told me that I feel like I have to tell. And it's a little I'm going to come back to the rest of the boat day, but this is just a fascinating story. I'm going to bring my dad on the podcast because he has some crazy stories from his days on his boat. But he said around the time that he was in the Solomons, he spent a lot of time there, but there was this story in the local newspaper when dad was there, and there was a tuna cannery there. So there was this pole and line tuna fishing boats that were used to catch tuna, and then they'd take them to this cannery. And the boat was going out, and they'd hired local Solomon Island crew, and it was going out at night. So they were crossing this body of water where a ton of ships had sunk during World War II, and the crew was sitting on the back of the boat at night, and some of the crew decided to go to bed, and one of the crew members was left sitting on the rail of the boat, and he actually fell asleep while sitting on the rail and fell overboard. And when they discovered that he was missing, they started searching, but they couldn't figure out where he was. And what happened was a week later, this man showed up at a village that was 10 miles away from where he fell into the water. And it was this same man. And the village ended up bringing him back to the tuna cannery where he worked. So he was able to tell his crew who were back there what had happened. And they were all clearly happy that he was okay. And it's just so beautiful. So he fell over and he said he was swimming for quite a while. And he said a huge shark came up to him and it gave him a ride. And he held on to the shark, and the shark took him to shore to where this local village was. And it's just the most beautiful story. And I said to dad, I was like, do you believe that? And he was like, yeah, he's like, it happened. And he's like, it's so interesting when you're there because the relationship these people have with these animals, they really view them as friends and their ancestors, and they believe that their ancestors live in the animals. I'm going to cry. And that this animal wanted to help him, and it was his ancestor. And the fact he survived and came back, I truly believe that that happened, and they worship them. And I just feel like that was just the most beautiful story showing the relationship between animals and humans, and how I think so often we forget that they are just like us, and you can have these beautiful, beautiful relationships if you value them in the way that they deserve to be valued. And we don't need to be scared of sharks. My dad's always said that. So it was a really beautiful story that kind of came out of asking him about his tattoo. And I think it kind of ties into the stories that I'm about to share about the rest of our day with the frigate bird, and my dad always having a relationship with that bird from that moment, and then seeing that colony. And, when tying back to the boat story, when we went to go back to pick my dad up, the driver said, we were like, can we just stay in this area? Because we wanted to go for a swim. And it was similar, like very shallow water, miles on end of just like this sand dune. And he's like, yeah, just stay. I'll go back. And my mom went with him to go get my dad. So there was like 5 of us that stayed, or 6 of us that stayed. And the guy drove off. And as he kind of rounds the corner and disappears, we look around, and it's a huge bay, like miles and miles and miles of just this sand dune that you can walk along in, thigh deep water. And you look out to this gorgeous island that has these big mountain ranges, and then the frigate bird colonies to the side of us. And we all kind of wandered in separate directions, and we all got very silent. And all of us had this realization at the same time as we looked around, and we realized there's not a single boat in sight. There's not a single human in sight other than our group. And it was this pure moment of solitude. And we all kind of turned to each other and like laughed. And everyone was like, had felt that same feeling of we are completely alone. And how often does that happen where you're completely alone in just the middle of nowhere, in pure nature, with nothing but yourselves? All of us had left our phones on the boat. We didn't bring it, coincidentally, and we'd all been taking photos all day. We all left our phones. And it was just this such a special moment. And I think it's a feeling I will really have forever. And I had a realization in that experience that my dad, who I'd mentioned had spent more than half his life on his research vessel, he had experiences like that all the time, in even more remote places. And just how lucky he is to have had that experience of just being truly on the cutting edge of just exploring, and just what an impressive life and what an interesting life to have lived. And I felt like that was my little glimpse into it that only lasted 10 minutes, but really it's something that I want to keep striving and trying to look for. And I think a question that I wanted to ask myself was, in moments of total isolation, what does it reveal about myself and my relationship with solitude? And I think I've spoken about solitude a lot on this podcast and how much I crave it. And I wonder if this is me or if it's something that I think everyone feels. I'm not sure. But at least for me, sometimes I wonder, is this, you talk about generational trauma, but there's also, you can be not even just trauma, but things you carry from your parents and being raised by a father who had so much of that. Maybe it is like embedded in my DNA as someone who craves that quiet and solitude, again, to say the word. But I do think that in those moments, I feel an immense sense of freedom, which I think is really fascinating, because you'd think that when you're totally alone, you sometimes might think the opposite of that, but it's like, I feel so free and I feel like I can do anything. It's just, it's a really interesting feeling, but I think what was so beautiful is everyone felt it in that moment. So maybe it is a universal thing, is that we don't have many times where we're totally alone. I mean, we do in terms of I'm alone right now, but really, truly alone. I think it's a really beautiful thing. And even though we were in a group, it was the most like solitude I'd felt in a really long time. So after that, we were all taken back to the boat. And then the journey home, magic moment number 3, which was magic moment number 1 was the frigate bird. Magic moment number 2 was the solitude in the beach. And magic moment number 3 was this whole day. And this is our sail back to the mainland was about 2 hours. And the whole day, our other family member who was there kept saying how much she just wanted to see a whale. And I had been like 100% you're going to see a whale. It's not even a question. But I was thinking we were on the other side of the peninsula, which you do like literally I look out and I'd probably see a whale right now. There's so many whales out here. But on the Sea of Cortez, there's not as many whales. And I'd asked the captain at the start of the day and he had said that. I was like, oh, damn, I totally forgot we were on that side of the peninsula. But he's like, sometimes we do see them. So I just kept hoping. I was like, this day will be perfect if, we just please see a whale. I was like, please manifest seeing a whale. La Paz provide the whale. So we're all sitting at the front of the boat on the catamaran. And at first we noticed this like little fin kind of popping up in front of the boat. And then we look down and this giant dolphin, the biggest dolphin I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of dolphins living in Australia, but I've never seen one this big. This was like a legit dolphin. I've always seen little dolphins. It was huge. And it was jumping with like along the rudder. And we were all like cheering the dolphin. I swear to God, the dolphin could hear us because then the dolphin would like jump up in the middle of the boat and then it would go back to the side and then we'd be like, yay, again, dolphin again. And then the dolphin would jump again. It was so special. And again, none of us had our phones. We just all were present with the dolphin and then the dolphin kind of swims off. And then we're like, oh, that was our whale. We saw our whale. That was our whale for the day. Then 10 minutes later, we hear this like spout of air up into like with water. And we look over and to the right, there was a whale. And we only saw glimpses of it and we followed it with the boat for a little bit. But it was just like magic. I could not believe that we saw a whale. We saw all the animals that day, from the sea lions, the frigate birds, the dolphin, we saw like a flying what is it? What are they called? Not a flying marlin. It was I can't remember what they're called, but they're the like ones that jump up in the air and then they go the stingrays. So, and then the whale. It was just so beautiful. And we were all just sitting down, just thinking like, what an incredible day. And our friends who've gone to that island multiple times, they even said this was by far their best cruise there ever. And it was just such a special day. And I just felt such magic in the world and just so much gratitude for being able to experience that. So really like my last 8 days has just been living in this bloody paradise. I so love it here. And going out and being in nature, it's just been so healing. And that really has led me to the topic I'd like to discuss today, which I haven't even gotten into yet, which I think is funny because I just labeled that the perfect day. But the topic I actually want to talk about is the search for perfection, which is really everything against that being a perfect day. Because I think while I've been here, I've started to think a lot about perfection. And I think we search for perfection in all elements of our lives, from how we look to our homes, to the cars we drive, our jobs, creative pursuits. We're constantly looking for perfection. And being in Todos Santos, I think I've realized how imperfect everything is. And it's not just Todos. There's plenty of places. India was like that too. And our friends who were with us, they're from Haiti, and they were saying this reminds them of Haiti. And I think it's the dirt roads and the dirty cars, the unmanicured gardens, dusty feet, sandy hair. People don't care what car you drive as long as it gets you from A to B. And the road doesn't matter as long as it works. It all feels very imperfect. And we were thinking that as we went to pick up food one night and it's all dusty and you're pulling up in this kind of makeshift little car park and stumbling through the little town and finding this very dusty looking storefront and then being greeted by this beautiful art piece that Jeffrey and I ended up buying. And I think, one of my favorite places to eat was this No Frills taco shop that had the best fish tacos ever. And I think like there's something about when something's unfinished, it just feels more alive. And that started to make me think about why in our lives are we searching for perfection when the imperfection is the most real. And I think what actually even is perfect. Because then I started to write down like, well, there are perfect spots here too, like this gorgeous 5-star hotel that was in the desert and we went for dinner there and it's stunning. It has this brutalist architecture. But I started to reflect on that. I was like, why am I labeling that perfect? Because nothing's perfect. It's just created in a different way. And I think what I loved about that is they build into nature and they're building around the cactuses and the land rather than just like taking from it. And you're eating at this Michelin star restaurant, but it feels like you're in someone's in their backyard, So I think even things that seem perfect, nothing is ever really perfect. Like that, day on the boat, although it felt like it, I'm sure, I think the idea of trying to strive for a perfect day, I mean, maybe because we weren't striving for that, that's when the magic happens. Sorry, thinking right now about what that is. But I think essentially what I started to come to is that perfection is a myth and you're doing yourself a disservice if you are striving for perfection. And I know that's easier said than done because I am such a perfectionist and I have struggled with that a lot. And I think it's held me back in lots of different areas as well. And it's something I've had to try and overcome and I'm still actively overcoming. So I started to think through maybe some areas in my life where I have struggled for perfection and how I want to overcome that and maybe sharing my own experience to help you if you're someone that struggles with this too. So I picked 3 areas that are kind of broader areas to dive into around this. And the first was appearance. And I think as women, we can all relate to this because we are always told we need to be perfect. I started to think through some of the messages that were pushed. Not an inch of hair other than on our heads, and not too much on our arms, but more hair on your head if you don't have enough. No wrinkles on our face, tight ass, toned stomach, crush our feet into 6-inch heels, contour our face, overline our lips, pull your hair back to lift your face, face filler, facelifts, filler, Botox. The list is fucking endless. And we are always sold images of perfection as women all throughout pop culture. From social media, advertising, and it's just endless. And I think it's no wonder women hold the majority of purchasing power because of all of this. And I actually Googled 2 stats because I wanted to know, is that women control over 31.8 trillion in worldwide spending. And then in the US alone, women control or influence 85% of all consumer purchases. So their purchasing power ranges from 5 trillion to 15 trillion annually. Literally, the economy would shut the fuck down if we stopped buying, which is so scary. And also how much power we have. Let's think about that. But I think this idea of perfection has been sold to us and it continues to be sold to us. And I'm a product of it myself. I often find it hard to distinguish between what I'm doing for myself and what I'm doing because I actually like it, or what I'm doing because I'm subconsciously conforming to society's representation of what women should look like. And it is so hard to untangle it all. And I'm not saying I have the answers in this podcast. I'm sharing what I'm constantly trying to work out. So some things that come up to me is, so my monthly facials, I actually do consider those a reset. I consider it giving back to myself. I find it so relaxing and I genuinely love skincare. Having that dedicated hour and a half every month, 6 weeks, and I love my facialist. Shout out to Carrie Lindsay, to Carrie Lindsay Studios, specifically Lizzie Boyle. Go see her. She's the best. This is for my New York girls. Carrie Lindsay Studios is in Lower East Side and Fort Greene, but hit me up if you forget this. I can send you her. She's amazing. But it's truly been, what I love about Lizzie is she really approaches skin is like within, it's like from in to out. It's not just what's on your face, and she doesn't oversell you products. It's all about stuff that actually works and a very organic way of looking at it. And I really think of it, it's such a full body reset, and it really helps me mentally, and it really is like a meditation. So for me, that is something that is giving back. But in my 20s, I overdid skincare. I was using every product under the sun. Anything that was recommended, I was using. I had like a 9-step skincare routine. It was fucking crazy. And because of that, I gave myself perioral dermatitis. There we go. And it's that when you get the kind of flaky skin here around your nose. And it took me a fucking year to get rid of it. I had to cut out everything. And now my skincare routine is super simple and I just keep it very basic. and only using things that actually work, or not actually stuff works, but like what works for me, and not overdoing it and not spending so much money on stupid stuff that I don't need. So that's something that I started to think about. The next one, I get Brazilian waxes every 8 weeks. I've been doing it ever since I was 18. And I've always told myself it's because, I'm in swimsuits, blah, blah, blah. I don't want any hair. But sometimes I question that as I'm lying on the waxing bed, having hot wax spread on my vagina and ripping the hair off. And I'm thinking to myself, why the fuck am I doing this? And I thought back to when I was 16 years old and I had my first boyfriend. And at the time he suggested I wax. I wasn't doing anything. I didn't even know that girls did this. I don't know. I don't know. I was very sheltered, but as a young kid. And I really didn't know. And he was telling me how all the girls in his grade, he was the year above me, that they shave. And I remember just being so humiliated. And I went home and shaved everything off. And I've never done that. I've always done it since. And I feel so sad for myself. And I seriously wonder, I was like, did that scar me? And then obviously everything you see where it's in swimsuits, no hair. And as I've gotten older, I definitely care less. I'm not as rigid as I used to be. I remember I used to be I won't see a guy if I haven't had a wax. It was just so nutty. And now I don't care about that at all. But I still find myself every 8 to 10 weeks booking my wax appointment, and I probably am going to go back to New York and get one. And I just wonder, is this really for me? And that breaks my heart because I still can't seem to get out of the habit of doing it, And then another thing is I've recently been thinking about getting Botox, and no shade to Botox because I actually am kind of pumped. I kind of am interested in doing it. Specifically, I want to do the contouring Botox. I've never had Botox before other than once I got the tiniest little bit above my lip for a lip flip. It literally did nothing. So I'm not doing that again, but I want to do the one where they put it up on the side and it lifts your brows. But again, this is for sure something that I am sold. And there's part of me that's fuck it. Why not? It's fun to play around with your appearance. And I dyed my hair blonde and doing all these things. But I feel I'm struggling with the concept as to why I'm doing this. Because do I need it? No. Do I want it? Yes. But why? And I started to think that if no one was watching, would I still choose to do these things? And that question really messes with my head because I don't know. I think probably not. If I lived in the middle of nowhere and no one was around me and we didn't have any access to social media and, maybe I wasn't doing the podcast and literally just lived on an island surrounded by no one, the bloody tribes my dad came across. You think those women are doing any of this stuff? Fuck no. And it's hard because when I wanted to talk about this, I actually don't have the answers. But I think maybe it's just good to talk about because it can make us all think about it more. And if anything, what I'm trying to do is I'm thinking about uncovering more the things that I'm doing and making sure I'm still doing them for me. And that whatever it is, I'm not striving for perfection. So if I decide to do Botox, I'm not doing it because I want my face to have 0 wrinkles and for my face to look perfect, because that's just not the fucking case. No one's face is perfect unless what is perfect actually? Let's not even say there are perfect faces because I remember reading some articles about people who have perfect, matching whatever it is dimensions on both sides of your face, but so much of that is crafted by surgery and filler and Botox and all that stuff. So even perfect is not real, but I think the beauty lies in your imperfections. And this is something that I think we've missed and we're starting to miss because I remember back in the day, the top models often were famous for their imperfections. And where did that go? And I feel it's kind of sad because it's we've just used surgery and everything to remove those imperfections. And I feel that's where the most beauty comes from. And that's where your uniqueness is. So it's something that I'm struggling with where it's fun to play around with different things, but also not wanting to lose any authenticity for who I am as well. And I think, can I hold space for loving beauty rituals whilst also questioning them. And this can be beauty rituals beyond that, like fitness rituals. Like I love to work out. It helps me mentally. It's something I will always do, but I should make sure I'm doing it for myself, not because I want to look a certain way. And maybe that can be an element of it, and that's okay, but that can't be the only thing that I'm doing it for. And I can't be striving for this perfection again. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this. So if you ever want to message me about your struggles, like please do, because as you're listening to, I don't have the answers for this, but it's something I'm thinking about a lot. And I'm reading this book right now called Girl on Girl, and it goes into a lot of like the messages we've been fed over the last, mainly. So I think she kind of dives into it from the 80s onwards, from everything from, reality TV to porn culture to, the Kardashians. Like there's everything about all these different beauty standards that we've been fed. It's really fascinating. I'll probably do a little bit of a recap on it when I finish it. But essentially, I think my takeaway is that I can hold space for things that I love. And I've said it multiple times, but I cannot be doing it to strive for perfection. Which leads into my next area, which is creative pursuits. So I cannot tell you how much perfection has fucked up my creative pursuits, guys. So often I've not started things or shared things because I didn't deem them as perfect. Anything from a script idea to an Instagram photo, I spend so fucking long thinking about all the ways that it's not perfect rather than just sharing it as a work in progress. And I think acting was a really perfect example. I would have endless lists of things I need to do before I ever emailed an agent. It was, I needed perfect headshots. I needed the best show reel. I needed to finish this acting course. I had to get my hair done. I had to do X, Y, and Z. It was endless. And this perfection in acting is barreled into you from every corner. And it's so bizarre to me because when I look at some of the best work from actors, from auditions to actual work in films and TVs, so much of it lies in the imperfection, lies in improv, lies in things that are unplanned. And it's what I started to think about was a lot of the time in acting, you do these things called self-tapes, which is essentially doing an audition at home. Imagine a similar setup to this. You have to have kind of a blank screen. So probably like I used to have like a blue screen, and you would have a reader. So you have a reader next to you and you'd be reading, like if you're those watching on camera, my eyesight's off camera because you'd be looking at the reader, and you would do your scene and then send that into the casting director. So a lot of the time you're not really going into casting rooms as much anymore, which has been great because it's opened up the casting pool to tons of new talent, and you don't have to be in places like New York and LA to be an actor. So the only thing that I thought was really interesting though is the stress of filming. So the light had to be perfect, the sound perfect, makeup perfect, lines completely memorized and off book. And look, some of these things really do help. When you have those things down, it's not taking away from other things, which can be the case. You could maybe have a great audition, but it's being taken away because of you're missing some things. But in the same vein, again, I've seen plenty of actors watch their self-tapes that have been shared online of just like the shittiest setups. They're like, half off book, but they're so real and they're so the character and there's so much authenticity and imperfection that they get the role. And I think that if you can embody the energy of what you're doing, the other stuff doesn't matter. And this goes across the board. It's not just acting. And I think the more freedom I give myself creatively, the better the work is. And with acting, I felt like so many parameters I set on myself of things I had to do that I kind of started to lose the love of it because it just felt like a list of things I had to tick off. And my favorite part was when I did get to perform and just be in it and raw. And so often it was like all the other stuff stopped me from getting there at times. And that's not saying that there are things that can be done that do help. There's plenty of things my acting coach has taught me that, seemed tedious at the time, but really did help. But I think it's more, I focus too much on the perfection. And I think when I focused less on the list and I just focused on the art, more interesting things happened. And the podcast has really been the best thing for me ever, because when I started it originally with Kat, it wasn't perfect and it still isn't, but we just were like, fuck it, like threw paint at the wall and just started sharing episodes. We could have practiced. We did like 2 practice episodes. We could have practiced for way longer. Our setup was like kind of shitty at the start, and we got better as we went along the way, but we just did it and we were consistent. And I think consistency and just throwing shit out there is the best thing you can do, and not just trying to question it every single time. Because I can say now, going solo, at end of every solo episode, I'll close up and I'll be like, that was shit. That was terrible. I'm so bad at this. Why am I doing this? It's so bad. I like shit talk myself. And I had to reframe it. One, I just need to start doing that. But two, I also think if something's perfect, that's where there's maybe a problem if you think something's perfect. Because if something's imperfect, there's always room to grow, and there always should be room to grow. Something should never be completely finished. It's always a work in progress. Life is a work in progress. This podcast is a work in progress, and it always will be, no matter where it goes. It will never be finished. And I think I want to constantly be evolving my life and my podcast and my work and everything, because it gives you somewhere always to go. So that's the creative side of things. And then my final little circle here, my final little topic here about perfection lies in relationships. And I think this goes from friendships to romantic partners. No relationships are perfect. We do ourselves such a disservice to act like they are. And I've spoken about this before, but when I started dating Jeffrey, I had been single for 10 years. I had never really had a proper adult relationship. And all I had to go on was pop culture and my friends and family's relationships. So when Jeffrey and I started dating, I actually suggested we do couples therapy very early on. And I suggested this because I had read from multiple couples therapists in the past about how important it is in a new relationship to start therapy really early on as a couple. And it sets the foundation for a really strong relationship. So I pitched this to him, and he was immediately responsive and was down to do it. So we started couples therapy after a month of dating. And our therapist was so pumped. She was like, I so wish more people would do this. I'm really excited. So we've been working with her ever since, now nearly 3 years on. And I'm not going to lie, it was not fucking easy, because what happened was, I think starting couples therapy early on brought up a lot of things that likely come up later in a relationship. I don't feel like we ever really had the honeymoon phase, because a lot of our own triggers and our own things were brought up, and then we were diving further into it in therapy. And I think that brought us straight into the mud and our own shit. And we had so many fights, so many near breakups, but I feel like eventually we've come up for air now, and our whole foundation has changed. And I feel like there is not a single thing I could not bring to Jeffrey. We have such open communication, and so much of that I feel like is the foundation we've built because of that. And I love him, flaws and all. We are all not perfect. He has flaws, I have flaws. And instead of breaking up because they're not the perfect version you think of who you should be with, it's learning to accept those flaws for who they are and learning how to communicate with that type of person. So I think like what I really struggled with early on was the fact that I felt like sometimes we were the only ones fighting. And thank God for a few close friends who were very honest about what they were going through. But so many I felt kept their book closed. And I felt like maybe something was wrong with us. And this goes beyond friends, not just friends who do this. Looking at social media, you're flooded by images and videos of quote unquote happy couples. And I understand not wanting to publish your fights as a normie. My cousin told me this term last week when I was talking about traders, and I was like, regular people, non-celebrities. She was like, I call them normies. I was like, ooh, that's cute. So normies, us normies. I also get like not wanting to publish your relationship. I'm not saying that. But I think creators who make a career off their relationships, being in the public, I think they have a service to be honest, and they don't need to go into all the nitty gritty, whatever feels comfortable for them. But I think this idea of perfection is so misleading, and it's not fair for people. I think it's so hard. And I'm just so sick of this false reality of perfect couples. It's okay to fight. Hell, it's actually healthy to fight and to learn how to fight well. And to understand that we're all imperfect and we're all carrying our unique trauma from personal to generational, and that inevitably that will appear in our relationships. And I think us normies, We can do a better job at being honest about the realities of our relationships with the people around us. And I'm not saying, again, we need to bear all, because I also think there's an element of needing to protect your relationship. I've also experienced that where I've overshared and maybe it's damaged relationships because people know too much in a way, and everything's fine. But I've realized that I have to be careful as well. But I think like in safe spaces, it's okay to share that you're also going through maybe similar things, or that you've had moments of imperfection, and that's okay. And it's not helping you or anyone else by giving off the vibe that you're in a perfect relationship. So I started to just think about, despite the fact wanting this change, it's not going to happen immediately. And I think more creators sharing this, hence why I kind of wanted to start this podcast, was even to share my own experiences, is thinking about, at least in the interim, how can I consume content without using it as like a benchmark? And I feel like it's just constantly telling myself that nothing is perfect, nothing's what it seems, and there's imperfection in everything. And that these people that are showing these very summarized kind of views of their life, where it's the highlight reel, there we go, and reminding myself it's a highlight reel, because we all do it. But let's try and be more honest with each other, because I think it's helpful and healthy. So those are just some of the areas I've thought of when it comes to perfection. And it's been interesting being somewhere like Todos Santos, because it makes me feel more inclined to embrace the imperfection. Like today, I decided to do the podcast with no makeup. Woo! I always put some type of makeup on, but today I was like, I'm going to go raw and bare all. Oh God, send help. But I think just little things like that of how we can embrace this mindset and try and find comfort in the imperfection. And I feel like personally, I have two sides. I've got my city side and my nature side. My city side loves to dress up and do my makeup and wear a cute outfit, go to a gorgeous restaurant and bar, live my little Carrie Bradshaw life. But the other side loves to be dusty, like bumping around in kind of a, dirty car, no makeup, sandy hair. There's balance, and it's okay to want both. But I'm just continuing to remind myself in both that it's not the search for perfection, but looking at everything as a work in progress. Like even those two things that I'm giving, one isn't imperfect, one isn't perfect. They're all just different sides of who I am, and nothing is ever completed. It's all a work in progress, because I think that's where the beauty lies. And I feel like me personally, as someone who experiences a lot of anxiety, if nothing is ever finished, I feel like that mindset can really get me out of the anxiety of feeling like I need to do all these things, because nothing is ever complete. This list of things I consistently have to tell myself to do, if I think of it as, even if I finish those, I'm not actually finished, then what freedom in that? You just continue living your life in this mindset of growth and progress rather than an end finish line. And I feel like that would really loosen at least my grip on how much I try and control so many outcomes. And maybe that's helpful for other people who struggle with anxiety, but it was a realization I started to have when going through all of this, is there's a lot of freedom in the imperfection. And ultimately, I said it again, everything is a work in progress. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. I feel like this was a long one, but it was really nice sharing this, and I will see you next week. Thanks all. Bye.